Hey everybody, Randy Patterson here with Boomerocity, and we're bringing back an old friend to interview again. It's Jock Bartley of Firefall, and Firefall has a new album out called Friends and Family 2. If you recall, about 2 years ago, when we last talked to Jock, we were talking about the album Friends and Family 1. And the concept is because Firefall was made up of the band members were made up of people from a variety of bands. You might even call it a super group, but each of the band members had played with other people and they toured with other people. And so the whole concept of Friends and Family 1 was that they would record some of the songs of the bands and artists that were their friends or that they may have played with when they were members of their groups. Very well received, and so Jock thought they should put out a Friends and Family 2, and it is amazing. You're going to recognize the songs. They're not Firefall songs, but they have a Firefall touch and vibe to it, and it is absolutely amazing. I can't pick a favorite, but the one that's going through my head a lot today as I record this is Love the One You're With, the great Stephen Stills tune. And it's got Winona Judd singing background on it. And I think the drummer is her husband. So Jock has a lot of stories about this album. We kind of go off chasing rabbits on some other stuff. It's very informal. You might see a lot of camera movement on his end, but we're just two friends talking and you're sitting in and getting to listen in on it. So while you're listening to this, would you please hit like and would you please hit subscribe? Both are not going to cost you a dime, but it helps us out tremendously. And go ahead and share it with your friends too, especially people who are either Firefall fans and or classic rock buffs just like we are. So without any further ado, here's my latest interview with Jock Bartley of Firefall. Until next time, this is Randy Patterson with Boomerocity. Take care.
Well, there we go. Hi, Randy.
Hey, how's it going, Jock? It's been a while.
It has been a while. Hey,
Yeah.
Before we start, I noticed that somehow my last name had been spelled wrong. I'm not Jock Bartley, but so you know that.
Yeah, I know that. That was my fault. Well, I fat fingered it. The B and the H on my keyboard when I was doing that was too close together and I didn't catch it. So
hey, not a problem.
My apology.
I've been no, it's okay. I've been called a lot worse than Hartley. And you can tell me when we're going to start, and I'm going to try to get in a place that looks and keep it pretty close to you.
Okay, well, go ahead and get situated, and we'll be ready to roll. Yeah, it's
Where
funny
you
what
at?
I'm in the Smoky Mountains. I'm outside of Knoxville, Tennessee.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So he
Hey,
and I
my
always
boat
kid
records
each
in the
other.
background look stupid.
No, they look great.
Oh,
That's
okay.
cool. I'm glad you positioned that way. That's how many
Well,
are on
yeah,
the wall.
I'm going to try to, I don't know how long this is going to be, but I'm propping my arm up so I can have my face be kind of close.
Okay.
I'm ready anytime you are.
Well, let's roll then. I thank you for clicking in. Are you in Colorado?
I am in Colorado, Westminster, Colorado, which is halfway between Denver and Boulder. Colorado is gorgeous, and we've had 60 to 70 degree temperatures for about 3 weeks.
Nice.
And we haven't really had too much winter like a lot of y'all have had. When I was in high school, I used to work on a work crew or a railroad crew on top of Pikes Peak, which was 14,110 feet.
You knew it.
God, I did.
Yeah, you would probably call our mountains foothills here. So
yeah, probably so. But hey, the Smokies are great. Thanks for having me on. Love to talk about our new record. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Well, before we do, two questions. It's been about 2 years since you and I last spoke. We last spoke when I call it Friends 1 came out. And
right.
So I want to know how you have been, and then also want to know how Friends 1 did before we start talking about Friends 2.
Well, I kind of knew going into Friends and Family, what ended up being number one, knew that we wouldn't really get any radio airplay like you used to in the old days. And probably knew that we wouldn't be in too many record stores, which are kind of obsolete anyway, So I can't say that it sold a lot. We've sold pretty good for where we had it. We sell them at gigs, and but everybody really loves the record, and we've gotten a lot of attention from it. And it's an interesting concept for those people who don't know. Um, my manager said to me a couple of years ago, the original Firefall members played in other famous bands,
Mm-hmm.
like the Byrds and Flying Burrito Brothers and Spirit and JoJo Gunn, me, in my case, Graham Parsons and Emmylou Harris. And
Yep.
he said, why don't you do an album of just their songs? And I went, great. That's a good idea, but let's expand that to, we used to tour and got to be friends with the Doobie Brothers, the band, Leonard Skinner, Marshall Tucker, Loggins and Messina. Let's do a song of theirs too. So that's what Friends and Family concept is all about. And after 8 or 10 Firefall records that I've been involved with that were all our material, or maybe with some outside song, this has been so much fun and so great. And we just finished number 2, and great songs on that one, and I think great songs on the first one too.
I agree. I agree. I love the first one and have given number 2 several listens too. And so tell me, is number 2 um, made up of outtakes from number 1, or is that all new recordings that you tackled, or what? Tell me about
Yeah, it's all outtakes, bad outtakes with a lot of mistakes.
it.
You're funny. No, we picked bands for Friends and Family 1, with obvious songs like Loggins and Messina, and some Leonard Skinner stuff and Fleetwood Mac. So when we made number 2, I knew I had to find 12 other songs. And we hadn't really done a Stephen Stills song. We'd done Crosby, Stills, and Nash, but we did Love the One You're With.
Mm-hmm.
And Lynn liked it so much, our record label guy, that he decided to put Love the One You're With out as the first single off of Friends and Family 2 that features Wynonna Judd and her husband, drummer Cactus Mosier, on it. And, it's just great. So we had to pick new songs by new artists. Like on this coming album, we did a Beach Boys song. We used to tour with the Beach Boys a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
and I knew that, Fleetwood Mac, the original Firefall toured with them, not only for their White Album when they first came out, but also in Rumors, which were the best gigs we ever played,
Mm-hmm.
in huge stadiums with Bob Seger and, Fleetwood Mac headlining and Bob Seger and Firefall, and just amazing stuff. I knew that it would be probably okay on Friends and Family too to have another Fleetwood Mac song. So we picked a different one, So no, these are all new songs. So 13 on the first record and 12 on the second. That's
Mm-hmm.
25 songs.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
as producer of the record, it was just so much fun. And, to sit back and listen and go, what does this need? Because some of the songs we kept just like the original, like the Dan Fogelberg song, which our version, of course, sounds different than Dan's, even though because it's a different singer, different guitar sounds and placements and all that. But then there were other songs, and our other songs on number 2, where I let us take it places that were new and still being true to and honoring the bands, the songs, the 70s that they came from. Songs like our Doobie Brothers song off of the first record,
Mm-hmm.
Long Train Running. Well, we stretched a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I couldn't help but notice. In fact, it made my ears perked up when I was listening to "Love the One You're With." I was like, "Who is doing the female vocals back there?" It had almost like a Bonnie Bramlett type of
Yeah.
vibe to it, and I was like, That can't be Bonnie. I mean, I haven't heard from Bonnie in years now, but she's kind of fallen off the face of the earth. Though I was kind of hoping it might be her. But then when I saw it was Winona, I thought, well, of course,
Right.
very similar tones there.
Huh. I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. And, Bonnie was so great, and her daughter's singing up a storm, in modern times here. But yeah, I used to play in a band with Cactus Mosier, the drummer, who's now the husband of Winona Judd. And I
Mm-hmm.
wanted a kick ass rock and roll drummer because on the original Stephen Stills version, there's no drums. It's all
That's
just
right.
percussion. Joe
Mm-hmm.
Lala on percussion.
Yep.
The late great Joe Lala that played on a lot of Firefall albums. And,
Yep.
so Cactus played drums on it. And I kind of got up the nerve, and I knew Winona. She had played one of my suicide prevention benefits back in the late 90s in Nashville. She had headlined one of my benefits in Nashville. So I knew her a little bit. And I asked Cactus if he would, do you think she would want to play on that song too? And he said, that's a great idea. And I know her producer's going to really like it. So I can say, without question, yes. And I went, well, that's amazing. And he says, of course, I'm her producer. And that sounds like fun. Yeah. So anyway, but Winona Judd, yes, she's got that distinctive, ballsy, bluesy voice, and there's nothing in country music like her.
Yep. No, I agree. I agree. Gosh, and that it just, I mean, I think that if it is at all possible, I mean, of course, radio's kind of, well, not kind of, it is dying. And so it's, with streaming and with
No,
satellite
don't say
radio.
that. It's not. It's not dying. What do I listen to in my car?
Well, there's satellite radio and there's streaming. So,
Yeah, really. Yeah, I'll tell you what. And you know what else has changed is some. Oh, sorry. Hang on a second. You still got me, right?
I sure do.
Songwriters don't really get paid anymore. I mean, I read something a couple of years ago that Farrell and his worldwide hit "Happy," he made like $4,000 on it. And back in the old days, God, songwriters, you made money off of radio play. You made money off of albums that your song was on. A lot of ways. And songwriters always made more money if they were band member songwriters than just band members,
Right. Right.
But that's how the game worked. But now somehow, you can get all these listens and all these plays and, the whole thing now. And they not pay the songwriter. I mean, Rick
Yep.
Roberts used to make 5 or 6 times more than anybody else in the band just because he wrote our big hits
Yep.
back in
Yep.
the 70s.
Well, I wasn't going to ask you this, but I'm going to ask you. I didn't even write it down. I was talking to Steve Postel yesterday, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
asked him the same question, and that is, and I will get back to Friends too here in a moment, but got to ask while I'm thinking. All right, so a lot of your peers, they're selling their catalogs, right? Because getting up in age, may as well take care of the estate now while you're still alive. I totally get that. But what my concern is now we also have all this stuff going on with this little thing called AI. And we're seeing songs created like a new Beatles song with 2 voices of people that have been dead for a while on there. And I'm wondering, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this. I mean, the one benefit I see is that AI will ensure proper accounting for royalties because they'll go out into all over the world on the internet and calculate that. So that's great for whoever's buying these catalogs that have spent, $3, $4, $500 million for the big ones, $5, $10, $20 million for the little bit smaller ones. But those guys are going to benefit.
Less money for the smaller ones, even from that. But
yeah, So what do you think of all that? How do you view all that?
Well, I'm a lead guitar player, and I joined into a band that had two great singer-songwriters. So I didn't write any of our big hits, and I've never made a lot of money on publishing,
Mm-hmm.
although at times I had 4 or 5 songs on a record. And, Sweet and Sour was on a platinum record and of mine. But so I view publishing slightly different than somebody who made a ton of money off of it. And we had guys in our band that did, because they got,
Mm-hmm.
Firefall got extreme amounts of radio airplay the first 3 or 4 years that we were in business. And that money goes all to the writer and publisher. Um, and, and that's the way the whole game works. And, it's too bad for drummers or bass players who are an equal member of a democracy in a band, but don't get any equal royalties because they didn't write the song, although they played a great drum part or a great bass part on it. So I feel for them. I'm curious about how the whole publishing, royalty, songwriter making money on stuff kind of dried up, because for the last 10 years, and I mean, I don't know what Nashville's doing right now, because those guys, they have, okay, I have a 9 a.m. with so-and-so to write for, Kenny Rogers' new album. And then we've got a 11 a.m. with, and it's just such a business in Nashville. I know that, and you get paid for radio airplays, but this streaming stuff and all the new ways that, or you have to buy, to get into iTunes or whatever. So it's very strange, and it's kind of messed up, and I'm not happy about it, but it really hasn't affected me directly because I never made a lot of money on publishing. I ended up becoming the owner of the name Firefall, and could go out on the road and play those songs, which I didn't write and don't make royalty money on, but, get paid, a lot of money to go out on the road. So,
Right.
it's all, I know that I'm really lucky and fortunate to be in a band that can do what I've been doing for the last 30 years.
Yep, that's true. Yeah, I think we're a ways away from seeing how this all shakes out. I do think that there could be more equity with the use of AI. You mentioned Apple, iTunes or Apple Music.
Those
Right.
two words don't fit together. Equity and people who are looking to make money off an AI. It's like,
Yeah.
equity is like, what does that mean?
Well,
sharing the money. Hey, let's share the money. Not.
Well, just as a fan, though, the way I view it is, all right, I pay my whatever, I forget even what I'm paying for Apple Music now, $16 a month, I think it is. And let's say, in my mind, as a fan, I'm not a musician, businessman, business degrees, finance degrees. So I think of it in those terms. I'm thinking, okay, here it is, March. March is wrapping up, and let's just say that I was in a Firefall mood, man. All I played, it was Firefall music the entire month on Apple Music. In my mind, there should be a chunk of money of that $16 that goes to artist royalties. Let's just put it in that general fund.
Totally agree with you.
And how it gets parsed out between songwriters and whoever owns the public, that's I'm oversimplifying right now, but if there is X dollars from that $16 that goes to artist royalties, artist revenue,
which I don't know if any go to that.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I'll bet a few pennies go to that, but the people in charge and pulling the financial strings of that whole arrangement, they want to make as much of that $16 as they can make.
Well, and everybody does, and that's human nature. But to look at it fairly and from a business standpoint, I would say that the algorithm should work something along the lines of there's a set amount of a subscriber's fee that he pays, they pay, he or
Right.
she, them, whatever. And out of that $16, let's just say it's $10. All right. Well, that should get parsed out depending on, if they're looking at Randy Patterson's play for March and it's 100% Firefall,
Right.
then that $10 of my $16 should go to Firefall. Next month, I might be on a Stones binge
or at least
something.
go to the writers of the Firefall songs.
Yeah, whoever gets that money, it goes towards Firefall, whoever. All right. The next month may be something, or if there's 50, if there's 10 artists I've listened to, then they parse it out.
Right.
That's just my thoughts on it. I'm sure it's much more complex.
You're
than
right.
that.
And I wish it was like that. I'm sure it's not. I don't really know how it's like.
Yeah.
But I do know that people that have huge hits in America now and even around the world, they're not making anywhere near what they used to 20 years ago. And in fact, it's kind of criminal, sometimes, about the only place songwriters make money anymore is if they land a TV show or to have in a movie, and that's cut and dry.
Yeah.
Okay, we're in 30 movies. We do your song. You have 2 songs on it, But
the mechanicals
and I heard
on it. Yeah.
Larry Burnett, who wrote Cinderella, which was in Dumb and Dumber 2, I heard that he and his publisher made a little money on that, which is good. They should. Thank you for the songs. I mean, in the old days, I'm sorry for my phone kind of moving
That's
around
okay.
a lot. In the old days, Mark Andes and I, we were just happy to have so many darn songs to play.
Yeah.
And Michael Clark and, and frankly, I mean, I've always thought that Firefall and a lot of other bands, Eagles, Fogelberg, Little River Band kind of stuff, it's all about the songs first.
Yeah.
Got to have the songs.
Yep.
Doesn't matter who writes them. Got to have the songs. And then number 2 is the singer of the songs has to really sell it and is very pleasing and the audience loves it, whether it's in the radio or live or whatever. So that's singer. And then the sound of the musicians playing together, those 5 or 6 people, which Firefall had a really amazing chemistry. And actually, some people have told me, no, man, the sound of the band was way better than, it's like, no, without those songs, we wouldn't have had a band, So, I realized, and Mark Andes and I were just happy, and Michael Clark were just happy to every time we had to make an album, Rick would bring, 8 or 10 songs and Larry would bring, 5 or 8, and I'd bring 2 and then we'd look at what we had. And the songwriter, but songwriters should get paid for that. And particularly if they're getting, drawing money to Amazon or, something. So I agree with you. You should write all that down and put it in a column somewhere.
I should. So we're putting together this album, were there any major differences in putting 2 together versus 1?
No, not really. It was a bit harder of a choice on the 12 songs because we had already picked 13 songs that fit the 1970s program, and I had to decide, because, when we were looking at the first album on Doobie Brothers songs, which damn Doobie Brothers song are we going to do? It's like they've got 30 that people recognize or, just an insane number of it, and I knew that some songs were pretty much, in my mind, off limits. What Heart song? Hey, we'll do Barracuda. I went, no, not Barracuda. That's hard. Let's leave that one alone. We'll find another one. And that's when singer John Basaha told me, I could sing the heck out of What About Love? And I went, okay. So sometimes the choices, I really ask the two lead singers, Steve Weinmeister and John Dasaha, you know, what Beach Boys song should we do? Because I thought it would be kind of stupid for Firefall to do one of the Surfin' USA songs, the early days of the Beach Boys, and somebody suggested, how about, and that's the one we did, which was kind of a lesser song. The name escapes my brain right at this moment.
Yeah, mine too. Were there any surprises in putting this one together versus all the other albums you've ever done? Because you're an old hand at this. I'm sure you anticipate most things, and so probably most things aren't a surprise to you, but were there any surprises putting this album together?
I'm sure there were, but not everybody's like this. But okay, when you're just a guitar player in the band and you're playing leads on solos and occasionally having a song of yours be on an album, that's one thing. But when you're the producer and it's an exacting science. And, I'm a painter too. And you start out with the blank canvas and you have an idea, I'm going to paint this. And then you start painting that and it goes, wow, that's not what I expected. And then you always deal with what you have at the moment. And you get to that point as a record producer about hands off, nothing else, don't add anything else. Or you might say, you get to the chorus, the big chorus of the song, and you're going, this section needs, a kick in the butt. How about another shaker and a tambourine? Okay, we'll do that. And then you just add things. So you're basically painting pictures, oral pictures for people's ears. And it can be really straightforward and still just take you to a new place. It could be one acoustic guitar and a vocal and a tambourine in the background, and it can still take you to that magical place the song takes you. Or else it can be like, a Beatles song. They were the masters of creating these little universes of, and they were the best, but there were other bands that did it too. But the Beatles were the top and best band ever. And I'll just have to say that if you think about the Beatles having done Rubber Soul, Revolver, Yesterday and Today, Sgt. Pepper's, Magical Mystery Tour in about 2 or 2.5 years. They made a record every 6 months or every 8 months. Mm-hmm. And the writers and, there will never be an output of, earth shaking, amazing music like those 4 or 5 albums I just named. And the growth, between, the album before Sgt. Pepper's and then Sgt. Pepper's, oh my God. So I'm just really happy that I'm old enough, and my body's falling apart, but I'm old enough to have gone through the 50s and sneak into my sister's room when she was out on a date to play Buddy Holly and Elvis Presley and Fabian and all the 45 she had. And then the 50s, oh, wow. And then the 60s, and I turned into a hippie in the late 60s, guitar player in bands. In the 70s, I was in a band that was making records and playing a small part of all that great music out of the 70s. Yeah, there'll never be another decade, I think, like the 70s.
Did you ever meet any of your idols? After, you've mentioned a lot of names there. My first concert I ever went to was Elvis
my God,
in Phoenix. I got to meet the Colonel there too.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I say that's my first celebrity interview. I was like 14 years old. But but did you, so for me, I don't consider myself a journalist. I'm just a fan who gets to talk to you guys, right? And so then when I'm driving down the road and I am listening to Sat Radio and a Firefall song comes on, I go, yeah, I got to talk to Jock a couple of times, that kind of thing. Are there any artists that you got to meet that when you met him, you were kind of like gobsmacked from meeting him because you listened to him before you became famous?
Absolutely. And for instance, I got backstage at a Paul Simon show in Boulder because I knew, the people putting on the show. And after he talked to his family and friends and everything, he came and greeted the 3 or 4 other people in the dressing room. And he got to me last. And I was just like, Paul Simon.
Yeah.
He'd be Paul Simon and Paul McCartney, and maybe 1 or 2 other would be in my top 3, and Paul Simon, you think about that. And I told him I said, "Hi, Baba, amazing concert. I just want to let you know that and I told him a little bit about the effect that he had on me. But when I put the picture that I took of him on Facebook the next day, people started asking me, well, you told him who you were, right? And I went, no, you didn't tell me you were Jock Bartley of Firefall. And I went, hell no, I didn't. Now he probably, who knew who Firefall was or heard some of our songs or whatever. But it's like, I'm not going to brag to Paul McCartney that, hey, I got a gold record too. It's like, and I've gotten to meet so many people. I mean, Stevie Nicks came and sat in with us twice in LA,
Wow.
And, Mick Fleetwood, managed Firefall for about 2 weeks, and hanging with Mick Fleetwood is totally a kick. He is one of the most unique people on the planet, probably. But, yeah. And I also got to, after shows, got to hang and drink sake with Ahmet Erdogan, who's the CEO of and
Atlantic,
bigwig of Atlantic Records, So yes, now there are a lot of people that I haven't met who I adore and would just fall over when I meet them. Of course, there's the Mexico story in Criteria, which I'm sure where I was out going to record some solos for our first album, and I'd just done a song or two, played pretty good, and I knew that Mexico, Rick Roberts' song Mexico, was going to be maybe my highlight as a lead guitar player, on that first record. And I mean, I'd played Mexico just right-brained and balls to the wall for 2 years on concert, working up to that moment. So I had an idea what I was going to play. The interesting thing was the day before, we had added the mariachi horn section in the middle of my solo, which I'd never had to contend with before. So anyway, I'm warming up. Producer pushes the button, said, "You ready to go?" And I went, "Let's go." I had my amp sounding great, and that was my old my Les Paul and my old Fender Super Reverb amp, who I could hit just about any note on any string and just go wah, and have it be feedback as long as I wanted to hold that note, And so I started playing, and it's going good, and and I'm thinking somewhere the horns are going to play in my solo, so I'm just cooking and playing like I normally was, and being a right-brained 25-year-old guy, or however old I was then. And then suddenly there were the horns, and I stopped playing, and they played, I played, they played. And then I finished playing out, and it ended up being a one-take performance,
Wow.
The one that's on the record. And the producer went, "God, that was great. Come on in." And I went, I had no idea what I was going to do when, the horns came into play. And I don't even know. I'd like to listen to that and maybe try to beat that little section. Just the horns, what I played against them. He says, "No, it was great. Come on in." I'm saying, "Really, Jim, I want to check that out, because I don't think I played too well, answering back the horns. I'd never played with them before." He pushed the button and said, "No, come on in." I'm a little ticked off. I take my guitar off. I walk into the control room where there's a lot of people sitting there. And the first person I see is my guitar hero, Eric Clapton, who's been watching me play really good.
Wow.
And, and I just turned into Jackie Gleason, and, and he said, he stood up and he shook my hand. He said, "Keen playing, man." And he left, and I kind of slumped in the couch, and the producer said, "Now, what do you want to do again?" And I went, "Nothing." I couldn't even hold a guitar. And all I can say was, it was a good thing I didn't know he was there before I started playing the solo.
Oh yeah, it would have lost it. So.
Yeah, and that's the only time I met Eric Clapton for about 30 seconds after he saw me play real good. So it's like, hey,
Hey,
that's cool.
that would be, if you're going to leave an impression with him, that's the one to leave, right? So, which song on this album would you tell fans? You point to them and say, "Hey, listen to this song. If you like this, you're really going to dig the rest of the record."
I don't know if I have one, but I was surprised when I was talking to John, lead vocalist, bass player, about if we wanted to do another Fleetwood Mac song, a second Fleetwood Mac song on number 2. And he said, I could really sing Go Your Own Way. And I went, I thought Go Your Own Way was kind of hands off that song. That's one of my favorite Fleetwood Mac songs there is.
The solo on that is killer too.
Oh my God, what a great song. Lindsey Buckingham and Fleetwood Mac at their damn best. And when we used to tour with them, I'd just sit like this on the side of the stage watching them play that song. So I kind of thought we wouldn't do Go Your Own Way, but John said we could. So suddenly I'm playing lead guitar on Lindsey Buckingham's song. And like I did with a lot of the songs on both records, like when we did Simple Man by Leonard Skinner on the first record, I didn't go listen to the lead guitars because they were the hottest 3 lead guitar players going back in the 70s. And everybody just loves how they played and on that record. But I didn't want to try to just copy what they did. Right. I wanted to just keep in my heart what I was doing and play it really good, like I would play their song. And that's kind of how I did on Go Your Own Way, too. And I'm really proud of Go Your Own Way. I'm proud of the Stephen Stills song. I'll tell you what, the first 6 or 7 records are some of the best music I've ever been involved with on whatever level. I'm just, I think it's really great. And I'm glad that, that we're getting good feedback from it, like from people like you, sir.
No. Well, that's what I was just getting ready to ask you. What is the feedback you're getting from people who have heard it so far?
Nobody's heard the whole record. Only people like you, have heard the whole record. We have our second single now out. So people heard Stephen Stills' Love the One You're With. And now we've done Eddie Money's Shaken. And I'm really glad Lynn picked that as the second single because, Firefall, I mean, a lot of people think Firefall is mostly just remember I love you and you are the woman. I love those softer songs, But all along, we've been a rock and roll band. And, to play Shaken, and again, I listened to the guitar parts that are on that Shaken and what the guy played, excellent guitar player for Eddie Money back in those days, and then I realized that the first couple licks are kind of signature guitar licks. And I said, well, I'm going to play those. I'm going to learn those and play them and then just take off and go wherever. But I'm really glad that we have a really rocking song for our second single and not a ballad.
Yeah, cool. I think anybody that's going to hear the whole album, they're going to be like me, and it's going to be a deal where it's like, you love each song for different reasons. But I have to admit, I gravitate towards the Stephen Stills song because, and I don't have the greatest ear in the world, especially at my age now. But boy, when I zeroed in on Wynona's voice, thinking it might have been Bonnie Bramlett, to me that was just the mixing. I mean, she could have been on there, and if it was mixed a little bit different, it might not have hit the way it did. But so it's not just the musicianship, it's not just the vocal prowess,
right?
But it's how it was mixed too. So you could, it brought it out.
Well, that one was
out just enough.
That one was a tough mix for me. And what's interesting, and you mentioned that, I mean, I could have had Wynonna a lot louder and featuring Winona. And she was really just answering back and and singing harmony vocals. So it's not like she was the lead vocalist on that song. When I talked to Cactus, right before he was going to record his wife Winona singing in their studio on our song, he said, I've got 2 tracks of harmony parts, but I decided to let her go. And is it okay if she did a bunch of scats? I went, the more scats, the better. Come on, and I used everything she sang, and it just really helped out that song. Another thing about that one that was interesting to me is I listened to the original Stephen Stills version that had our great friend, the late great Joe Lala, playing, congas, percussion, timbales. It was all percussion and Stephen's acoustic guitars. I read something, I called it up on YouTube or something on the internet, and Stephen used a totally weird tuning on most of the acoustic guitars. It was tuned to a C, so it went C, C, G, C. It was like, and I went, oh my gosh, okay. And I got the guitar into that tune, and it might not even be a C tuning; it might be a D tuning. I can't remember what it was or what key the song is in, but I got into that tuning and found, I watched. There was a film clip of him playing in that tuning, so I could say, okay, here's where da da da, where the fingers need to go, and it sounded pretty cool. But it also, it had some really low notes ringing through there. So I do what I just normally do when I'm doing acoustic guitar parts. I don't mind putting 5 or 6 different acoustic guitars together, playing slightly different things. Right. And this one on a high string guitar, and this one's a 12 string, and this one's down to D, and then make this 1 or 2 sounding just gigantic acoustic guitar, So I had a couple of them with the tuning that he he played it in, and then I did just a few regular, like I would have, played it before I knew all of that. Right. And that was such a fun track to do.
I bet.
And once I got the drums back from Cactus, I went, woohoo! we're on the right track with this one.
There you go. You mentioned Joe Lala a couple of times, and I must admit, I totally forgot that I talked to him probably, let's see, I've been doing this 16 years, probably about 14 years ago.
Wow.
A friend of mine, Rob Parisi of Wild Cherry, he is good friend. He was good friends with Joe, and Joe was living in Florida, kind of down and out, also taking care of his mom too at the time.
Yep.
And Rob arranged for he and I to chat. And I was ready to interview him. And unfortunately, I'll say this, that the interview never saw the light of day because,
oh Jesus.
Well, I've got it, but it just turned
Stop a second. Stop.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I've got a disaster on my hands, and I sat on the corner of a table, and the table leg broke. So now I'm going to sit on the stairway, and we'll finish. Sorry.
All right, no problem. But anyway, Joe wound up complaining about some people, well-known people, and I just didn't see the need to post that, because I don't like I won't go into trashing people or anything. Try not to. My Dan Peak interview that I posted the audio on recently, he did slam some people, but that was Dan talking, and I wasn't asking for it. But
right. Well,
maybe
to me, as an artist, you have to learn early on, if you're going to ever be asked to do interviews, to not slam anybody. And even if you have a problem with the producer or the leader of the band or blah 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 or something, you don't put that stuff out in public. So that kind of surprised me about Joe. But he was a really lovely fellow. And, you know, after he died, he must have had 40 gold and platinum records on his wall from playing with everybody from Crosby, Stills and Nash to Stephen Stills to the Bee Gees to everybody. And we took him out on the road with us whenever we could make it work. And he was our sixth member of the band. And he was such a great, particularly conga player, So sorry your interview with him didn't work. But shit happens.
I may be remembering it a little off. I haven't listened to the interview since, and so I should go back because I mean it's historic in its own right because it's Joe, right? And some of the names he mentioned were significant and all that. It might be a thing where if I might make a copy of it and send it to the people he was talking about so they can have it, but probably not.
No,
just keep it.
I wouldn't do that.
No,
you got to though realize that when he was playing or with anybody was playing with a Crosby, Stills and Nash type of band where they were just the hired gun to play their part. And no matter how much a couple of the big stars, said, man, we can't do it without you. And we love how you play. And, blah, blah, blah. And here's an extra bonus and all this kind of stuff. There's always some of those jerk rock and roll stars who don't treat side guys very well.
Yeah.
And they kind of, I got my thumb on you, so, I can't, me being in a band and, being in a democracy. And even though, it's my band now, everybody gets to say and stuff, but I can relate to people who have been in that position where the person they're working with doesn't treat them very nicely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, we get off that subject.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't know enough about it to take a side. Not that it was my business to take a side. It just, he was commenting. Right. But so, hey, what's next now? You got this album rolling out. What are you going to do next? What, any touring, any shows you're going to do to support it?
Well, yeah, of course. We're not touring a whole lot this year, it looks like, which as a guy in his 70s with, walking with a cane and stuff, it's like, that's okay with me. We are touring. I'm doing a lot of interviews. It's my plan that now that we've done the second Friends and Family album, which is a lot of other people's songs, it's my plan that I want to do, even if it's not a full record, a 5 or 6, 7 song EP of new Firefall songs, because we got a bunch. And I think there's a few. I know I have a couple that got passed on, or I wrote when there was no album being recorded, So what's next for Firefall is more touring, and hopefully an EP coming in the next 6-8 months of Firefall songs. And who knows where it all goes. I'm writing some songs that are absolutely not appropriate for a band named Firefall. And I'm looking to, find some heavier rock guys to record them, because songs are just songs anyway.
Yeah. Well, when that EP gets close to being released, let's talk again. Let's do another one of these and talk about it.
Okay.
I'd love to do that. And, but man, it's always a pleasure talking with you, Jock. And you've got tremendous stories that I love hearing. And I'll definitely be rolling this out, and I'll route the link of it all to you. It'll be on my website, on YouTube, and all the major podcast platforms. And I'm sure hopefully I can generate a sale or two for you, and people.
I hope so too. But thank you. I appreciate your interest and wanting to put me on and backing us. You're a prime supporter of these Friends and Family albums. Some people didn't like the concept. I heard some stuff on Facebook, a year and a half ago. Why in the hell would Firefall be doing oh, they're Doobie Brothers songs. That makes no sense at all. It's like, well, okay.
They don't get it. They don't get it.
They don't
You
get
know,
it.
that's the thing. And I'll say this before we run. That's what I love about the music business. Now, again, I'm not a musician. I'm not, I'm not an insider in the industry or anything. I'm just a fan that gets to talk to you guys. But what I'm always struck by is how intertwined everybody is.
Yeah.
The interactions between musicians and how they work together, and I mean, it just blows my mind. I'm always learning something new about who has worked with who.
Right.
And I love it. And there's this constant cross-pollination going on that I think is great. And I think that's as much for consumption as the music itself. If people just realized how that is. I mean, for guys like me, I love that kind of stuff. So I eat it up. And I think
it's still happening. And you go out on the road and play with two other bands, and suddenly you're asking one of the guys to play on your next record, or they one of their guys gets sick and they ask you to sit in for 2 gigs or whatever.
Yep.
It's still happening a lot. I think that, in my mind at least, the biggest time where that was so obvious was back in the early Eagles, Flying Burrito Brothers, Graham Parsons, Chris Hillman, the Byrds, Roger McGuinn, Clarence White, that whole thing. I mean, Clarence White was the guitar player that everybody wanted to have be on their album because he was so good. And, and it was just, and that's what's great about my career, is that a lot of that Southern California thing moved to the mountains above Boulder, Colorado. And then suddenly I was in it. I was part of it. It was really great, to think, my favorite bands in high school were the Beatles and the Stones, and some of the other British Invasion, Kinks and Hollies and that. But the Byrds were it. And, I get to Boulder 2 years later, I'm playing in bands with Chris Hillman. I joined into Graham Parsons' band. I'm playing with Michael Clark in Firefall. It's like the Byrds, they were the American Beatles for a couple of years.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Oh, I want to mention one other guy that I met that you asked about, if I've met any big stars or whatever. I got to meet and talk to for about an hour after his show, Felix Cavalieri from the Rascals.
Wonderful guy. I've interviewed him 2 or 3 or 4 times.
Oh, he's great. And and you know what? There's a lot of people that thought, that the Rascals and the Young Rascals were by far the biggest band in America, and they had the hits to prove it. And Felix, I told Felix when I first started, I said, "Oh my God, the Young Rascals were my first concert that I ever went to in Colorado Springs, and then you came back and I went to that one too. So my first 2 big concerts were the Young Rascals back when Good Lovin' was happening." And he's such a nice guy.
He is very gracious, very easy to talk to. Like I've said, I've talked to him, I think at least 3 times, maybe more. Yeah. And still putting out great music. It just, the guy is phenomenal. And a golden heart. I know he's been trying to raise money for Maui ever since those fires there, but trying to help those people out.
Same thing with Mick Fleetwood. Mick Fleetwood has his bar and restaurant back open, but he's trying to raise money for Maui too.
Yeah. That's somebody I'd love to talk to. There's a short list I have, and the more I interview, the more I got to update my list. But Jock, you are always so kind and generous to chat with me, and I just want you to know my door is always open to you. So anytime
let's do it again soon.
Yeah, when this EP comes out, let's do it before it lands, and let's talk about it. Okay.
Cool. Thank you very much. Let's stay in touch. Bye-bye.
Likewise. Stay well.
Will do.
Bye-bye. This has been another fun-filled episode of Boomerocity with your host and producer, Randy Patterson. The theme song is Roll the Dice and is recorded and used by permission from Quinton Hope. Quinton is spelled Quinten, and Hope is Hope. And you can find out more about Quinton at quintonhope.com. Post-production is done by Cardinal Sins Productions. The Boomerocity name, logo, and content is copyright protected. Segments may only be used with written permission by Boomerocity and or its assignees. Inquiries should be directed to input@boomerocity.com. Copyright 2025.